Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. County fairs are bringing together communities all across Oklahoma this time of year, and this week we're in Anadarko for the 98th annual Caddo County Free Fair.
A lot of these kids don't get an opportunity to work together and get to know each other as much as a lot of other counties do, except for the county fair. Being a rural county gives us a really active 4-H program.
We'll have more from the fair a little later in the show. But first, getting a jump start on planning for winter grazing.
Last year, it turned out there was a lot of great opportunity for cattle producers to graze their cattle on several different winter forages. Paul, let's kind of look at what producers need to be thinking about whenever it comes to planting different options.
Yes, Dave. There's been we've had a really good August in a lot of the state for setting us up for a really good fall wheat production year. Even though we had a really dry July, here in Stillwater we've had about 6 inches of precipitation here in August, so we should be set up for a really good fall if we can get our wheat planted at the right time.
What should producers think about when it does come to planting the different styles of wheat?
There's several different options. If we're looking at forage only for graze-out or dual purpose or grain only, we get a whole different set of recommendations for those production systems. If we're looking at forage production only, we're really driving toward getting as much fall forage production that we can with little emphasis on what grain production would be. If we're looking at grain production, we're maximizing grain production. And when we look at dual purpose, we're giving and taking for both of those. For instance, when we look at forage production, we can maximize our forage production by planting our small grains, especially wheat, at the end of August or 1st of September. We maximize our optimal time for grain production is the middle of October. And if we're in dual purpose, we're looking at mid-September. That delay from the 1st of September to the middle of September can decrease our forage production potential by up to 1/3. We've had plot work and other research with that early September planting where we were able to get 3,000 pounds of forage dry matter production in the fall. This decreases by 700 to 1,000 pounds when we delay that by 2 weeks. And that could be related to earlier turnout for cattle on forage only production systems, or a higher stocking rate for those cattle during the fall.
When it comes to planting and really maintenance of the wheat field for grazing, what are some of the differences in dual purpose versus a grain only?
Dual purpose and also on a forage only, we're looking to increase our seeding rate by 1.5 to 2 times. The recommendation for grain production would be 60 pounds or a bushel of wheat per acre. And on our fall forage production systems, we're looking at 90 to 120 pounds. And that difference between 90 to 120 pounds can relate to a much higher forage production. So it's really beneficial to go on the higher side on that seeding rate. It more than offsets the cost of the seed. Soil temperature is another thing that we need to look at. Wheat will germinate but between 40 and 90 degrees, but it's optimal right at 77 degrees and below. We need to look at a variety that's been selected for forage production. Gallagher and Duster are both OSU varieties that are very good forage production, and they're also not as sensitive to those warm soil temperatures and will emerge through those higher temperatures. When we're looking at forage production only or dual purpose, we need to remember that an improved variety and a selected variety for our goals is going to be beneficial compared to a bin run wheat where we don't know what we're going to get. It's always worth the extra to pay for a known variety.
When it comes to grain only, there's always the importance of higher yield, the soil fertility, and the inputs that go into making a crop. Whenever you're doing forage only or a dual purpose, are those inputs as important if you're just going to graze? Absolutely.
When we're pushing for a forage crop, it's still a crop. And we need to have our nitrogen and phosphorus, especially set up to meet those production goals. And when we're looking at a dual purpose crop, we're trying to grow two crops and essentially double cropping. So we need to fertilize for that forage crop and then come back and fertilize appropriately for our grain crop too.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Paul Beck. And for more information on grazing cattle on wheat, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
As we're about to enter the month of September, it's the time when many of the calf sales will be taking place all across the Southwest. You may be interested in trying to market your calves in one of the value-added calf sales that'll be coming up. You'll be interested, of course, to find out that you need to wean those calves at least about 45 days prior to the sale date if you're going to enter one of the value-added calf sales. There's data that really helps us understand that. Iowa State University did a study over a 9-year period of time, over 2,000 head of calves that came into one of their feed-out programs that they have in Iowa. They kept track of the health of calves that came into those feed-out programs. They found that calves that had been weaned less than 30 days when they arrived at the feedlot, 28% of those calves came down with some degree of bovine respiratory disease, as compared to only 13% of the calves that had been weaned longer than 30 days. And that's not all the story. The calves that had been weaned less than 30 days that got sick apparently got sicker, because 6% of all the calves that had been weaned less than 30 days required 3 or more treatments in order to get over the disease, as compared to only 1% of the calves that had been weaned longer than 30 days going into their feed-out studies. So as we think about when we're getting ready to get our calves to market this fall and we're going to enter one of the value-added calf programs, let's understand that there's a reason why we want them weaned out here at 45 days. That makes sure that all of these calves are past the stress of weaning and they're ready to go. Of course, the value-added calf sales will have specific vaccination protocols that you'll need to follow. You need to contact the representative for the upcoming calf sales to make sure that you know what those vaccination protocols are and the weaning date that's necessary before your particular targeted sale. Now, the Oklahoma Quality Beef Network is one way to market calves through a value-added calf sale, and you can learn a lot more about that particular program by going to their website. It's something that we'll put on the show links for here at SUNUP. Just go to sunup.okstate.edu, look under show links for the website for the OQBN program here in Oklahoma. It's a good way for you to market calves and get a little bit more in terms of price per pound out of those calves and provide a healthier calf for buyers as they take your calves home this year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, it's about that time for pecan season, and this year's starting to shape up to be a pretty good crop. So, Phil, how are things going with the pecan crop?
Well, they look excellent. We have the potential for maybe close to a 30 million pound harvest this year in pecans statewide. That's not our record, but it's a pretty good number of pecans. This is the critical time for pecan weevil after the pecans have gone through the water stage. So if you can go out in your pecan orchard and you can pull a few nuts off the tree, And if you can cut them with a knife and there's water that comes out of there, it's too early. Don't worry about pecan weevil that early in the season. But we're probably past that stage for most varieties, most of the cultivars that we have out there. If those pecans are past that water stage and they start to enter that gel stage where there'll be like almost what looks like a little gel inside that nut, that's the time what's really critical for pecan weevil management. And when it gets into that dough stage, that's the next stage after the gel stage, when the pecan weevil females are out there laying eggs. And they'll lay anywhere from 2 to 4 eggs in each pecan nut that they come across. They'll lay 50 to 75 eggs during their lifetime, and they'll put 2 to 4 eggs in each pecan nut. They actually lay it in the kernel meat itself, and the pecan weevil feeds on that kernel meat.
So when we talk about management, what are some management practices that producers can take?
Well, we suggest that they, in terms of managing the crop, we suggest that after that dough stage, or during that dough stage, that's the time when they have to make their first application of insecticide. Then the second application is based on what we capture in circle traps, and use a threshold that we suggest, which is 0.3 weevils per trap, not per tree, per trap per day. And we suggest 2 circle traps per tree so that you are encircling the tree if possible. And then if you follow that threshold, you'll do a pretty good job of protecting it. And so insecticides is kind of the basic approach that we take. We have some that are traditional types of insecticides. Most of the things that the big commercial operators are applying are pyrethroids, and they do a very effective job. The problem with pyrethroids nowadays is that they have a tendency to flare aphid populations. So you got to be careful about the aphid populations. We're in a situation right now with the rains that we've been getting that aphid populations haven't been a great concern. But if that application flares aphid populations, which it does tend to do because pyrethroids are just of that nature, then you might want to incorporate a different type of insecticide that also manages aphids.
All right, thanks, Phil.
You bet.
If you'd like some more information on pecans and pecan weevil control, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Talking crop insurance now and some important dates to keep in mind. Here's our Extension Ag Policy Specialist, Amy Hagerman.
So this last time in the Farm Bill, Secretary Perdue announced that we would begin election processes for ARC and PLC, the 2 farm safety net programs, starting in September. It looks like right after Labor Day is when those sign-ups are going to begin. Producers will need to go into their local FSA office and talk to them to make sure they've got all of their paperwork on file for the most recent crop years so they can do their election for the 2019 and 2020 crop years. Now remember, this Farm Bill is a little different from the last Farm Bill. The 2014 Farm Bill, you were signing up for all 5 years for ARC and PLC. It was an irrevocable election. This time is a little bit different. You're going to be able to sign up for 19 and 20 as an irrevocable election, and you can leave that in place for the entire 5-year time period if you want to. But if prices change or crop conditions change and you feel like a different safety net program will be more appropriate for you, in 21, 22, and 23, you'll have the opportunity to go into FSA and change your election at the time of enrollment. Enrollment will still happen every year, just like it has in the past, which is going to make things a little funny for this fall compared to usual. This time, right after Labor Day, you'll be able to elect to ARC and PLC and enroll your 2019 crop year. But if you had a little patience and waited until we got into the new fiscal year after October 1, you'll be able to elect and enroll your 19 and 20 crops. And that process will probably go out into the spring. So be in touch with your FSA office and they'll be able to give you all the details to get your program elections done on time.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. It was an interesting week of weather we experienced this past week. A fairly strong cold front moved into the state on Monday, bringing a refreshing change in temperature. It also came through with a walloping windstorm. Monday evening winds reached into the low hurricane strength level. The highest Mesonet recorded was 77 miles per hour at Guthrie, but winds were at damaging levels in several central Oklahoma counties. The front also brought rain to the state, even some to the driest areas in south central counties. Nearly 10 inches was recorded again in the east at the Webbers Falls and Salisaw stations, adding to their totals. I've shown you this map a couple of times this summer. It is the number of days since a site has recorded at least a quarter inch of rain. This is the best it has looked for the last couple of months. Currently gone are the orange blobs over much of the southwest and south central areas. Soil moisture saw some improvement too. This 7-day change in the 10-inch fractional water map shows much more green, indicating improvement, versus purple, which indicates drying conditions. Gary's up next with some changes to the most current drought maps.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, as Wes mentioned, it was definitely shake, rattle, and roll across the state this week. Most areas got a good dose of rain. How did that impact the drought? Let's take a look at the latest drought monitor and see what we have. Well, we obviously had some improvements across central Oklahoma up into northwest Oklahoma. Now down in the southwestern parts of the state that actually missed out on the good rains, we now have a larger area of extreme drought. That's that red area, surrounded by the severe drought and moderate drought areas. Now we also have a little bit of an increase in the moderate drought across southeast Oklahoma, so a little bit of an increase down in that part of the state. So the key to the drought now is what's happening in that 60 to 90 day time frame. We see more than 24 inches in the far northeast and just over 4 inches in the southwest and the panhandle. That doesn't sound like a lot in the southwest and the panhandle, but how is that relative to normal? If we look at the percent of normal rainfall map for the last 90 days, we see that in the panhandle, that's really 50 to 70% of normal, so still dry out in that area. And also across much of western Oklahoma, we have from 50 to 70% of normal, but in that core drought area, where we now have the extreme drought, that red part of the drought monitor, we have less than 50% of normal, and in some cases down close to 40% of normal for that 90-day period. So really starting to see some serious deficits down across that part of the state. I thought it'd be interesting to see how we are for the year thus far. We see this rainfall map from the Mesonet, and we have a large range of values as we go from the east to the west, and that's, you know, part of climatology, but it's a little bit extreme this year, where we go from 60 inches in the far northeast to just about a little under 12 inches in the panhandle. So we didn't get rid of drought altogether. We actually had an increase in parts of the state, but it is a good start to getting rid of the drought in at least a majority of the state. Hopefully we can get some compounding rains and help eliminate the drought altogether. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Well, crop prices have been kind of stagnant, so Kim, why don't you give us an overview on some of the crop movements?
Well, let's start with corn, and right after that was the report. It's been running in about a 15-cent range. It's in a slight downtrend. It may be creating a sideways pattern between $3.65 and $3.80. Of course, wheat, it's tied to corn right now. It also established its trading range on August the 13th. It's a 10-cent range from $4 and $4.10, and that's a sideways pattern. You look at soybeans. Now they started their trading range about August the 9th. Before that was the report between $8.55 and $8.90. It's a slight downtrend. And then cotton, all these prices are in the tank. August the 5th, cotton started a sideways pattern between 57 and a half and 60.2 cents. So all these prices are low and they're really not moving very much.
Is there any other news going on in the crop markets right now?
Well, there's a lot of news bouncing around out there. Of course, Russia probably leads the deal. The one interesting thing I read last week is that Russia's price, they had a sale to Egypt. It was about 10 cents a bushel cheaper than it was a couple weeks ago, and it said it was because of relatively low U.S. prices. So it's interesting that U.S. prices are leading the market right now. You look at Russian production, it's at 2.68 billion bushels. It may be lowered a little bit, and their exports are projected to be down 74 million bushels this year from from last year. If you look at the last 3 years for Russia, 1.52 billion bushels in 17, 1.32 billion bushels in 18, and 1.25 billion bushels in 19. So a downtrend there. You look at Ukraine, they're offsetting Russia's lower production and lower ending stocks, and their exports are supposed to offset Russia's. And then hard red winter wheat exports in the United States are 65% higher than they were this time last year.
Last week you were talking about how corn prices, as they were falling, wheat was right behind it. So will wheat prices follow corn prices still?
I think they'll still continue to follow corn. I think wheat's been priced pretty much as a feed grain right now. Of course, I didn't mention in the news corn, the market's watching closely what USDA's estimate of with their 90 million acres planted versus the trade's 86, 87. So whatever happens there, wheat's going to follow corn, probably either up or down.
Do you think there's anything that's gonna get wheat prices back to the $5 range?
Yeah, there's a few things that could happen to get it back to the $5 range. Russia's got a third of their harvest yet. They could lose that, and I think any reduction in Russian production is going to end up lower exports on the market, so it open up some for us. We could lose the Argentine crop, the Australian crops. Both of those would result in higher wheat prices around the world.
So you're the odds maker right now. So what are the odds that we're going to get $5 wheat before January 1st?
I'd say you got about a 1 in 10 shot. Maybe I just increased that.
I'm holding you to that, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, 1 in 10 then. We'll stay there.
All right, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Well, I know that our county fairs, local fairs, and then it won't be long before our state fairs start. And I just want to remind everybody that animals harbor pathogens. So there's a possibility that an animal can make you sick, and you can make them sick too. So we need to be careful when we attend areas where animals are. We've already had an incident out in California at a fair out around San Diego. We had 11 people that got an E. coli infection there. 1 person died. The common denominator in all of these cases there was that they went to a petting zoo, or they went to where the livestock were being exhibited, or they had contact with the animals there at the fair. We've also already had an incident in Michigan where they've diagnosed swine influenza in some of the pigs and had to make those pigs go home. We don't have any human cases of influenza there yet, but these are problems that we can see at our fair. So it's really important that people be careful when they're at the fair. Practice good personal hygiene. Especially when you go into any animals where animals are. Make sure that after you've been there, you wash your hands. Don't eat food in those areas. That's bringing your fingers close to your mouth, so be very careful about those types of things.
Back to Caddo County, where volunteers have made the fair a success for nearly a century.
We're in the Caddo County Livestock Show. We started bringing in pigs Sunday afternoon and entering those. And we're doing our hog show, just finished our gilt show. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of excitement. Caddo County is a big county. We go from Hydro all the way to Cement Surreal. So it's 50 miles from here to Hydro, so that's a pretty good area for the kids to come in. So a lot of these kids don't get an opportunity to work together and get to know each other as much as a lot of other counties do, except for the county fair.
I was showing my York, I was showing my gilt, and I won reserve breed. Just coming out here and just having fun showing pigs.
We still do a lot of rural things with the livestock shows and open classes and the 4-H classes. With that many clubs and that many volunteers, there's always a lot going on.
I have so many volunteers that just give of their time and their talents. Just a great group of people to work with. And they love for the public to come in, so they will welcome you when you bring your exhibits in.
If it wasn't for volunteers in communities, it doesn't matter whether it's a county-wide thing or your local town. If it wasn't for volunteers, And sometimes you wonder if you're going to get those volunteers. We've had some ladies walk in today say, I'm here, what can I do? Some of these ladies, I've only been doing the county fair for about 10 years. There's some of these ladies that have been here for a long, long time. Every time we holler we need help with something, they're there. Our 4-H kids help get it ready. It's just all volunteers.
We usually have about 18 to 24 4-H volunteer leaders. So that takes a lot of leaders, a lot of clubs. Being a rural county gives us a really active 4-H program.
They care, they truly care about the county fair or whatever project they're working with, but we're big on tradition too. And I think that's what keeps our county fair going and so vibrant and alive.
And every year we go, one more, we're ready to do it, we're glad it's here, and we hope we get more volunteers for next year.
And that'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. From the Caddo County Fair in Anadarko, I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.